So welcome everyone to today's briefing. I'm Sunita Sarabji. I'm the health editor at Ethnic Media Services. Sandy Close is in the UK today, so she may join us later on. So I will be moderating today. And our topic today is growing Main Street America, one small business at a time. The Small Business Administration notes that there are over 33 million small businesses in the US, making up 99.9% of all businesses. Small businesses employ almost half of the US workforce and add 44% to its GDP. And this is an interesting data point for reporters. Immigrants have started up more than 18% of small businesses in the US. This week's briefing will explore the challenges of accessing funding to start up and expand a small business. Such challenges are especially acute for women and marginalized communities. We ask speakers to speak slowly for our interpreters in Spanish, Mandarin, and Korean, and we ask reporters to enter questions in the chat. We will take questions from each panelist as time allows. And we will also send a video of today's briefing and expanded bios with contact information for each speaker to all participants later today. So first of all, let's welcome our amazing panel for today's discussion. Senator Mark Warner, a Democrat from Virginia who co-chairs the Community Development Finance Caucus. Ms. Shernaz Daver, who's the CMO of Khosla Ventures and has been in the tech industry for over 25 years. Charles Phillips, the co-founder of the Black Economic Alliance, among so many other things. Mr. Phillips also served on President Barack Obama's Economic Recovery Advisory Board. And then finally, Sierra Georgia, who is the founder of Gelat'oh, a small business based in DC. We will begin today's briefing with Charles Phillips, because I see the senator has not joined us yet. Mr. Phillips.
He's on.
Oh, there you are. All right, then. We will begin today's briefing with Senator Warner.
Oh, like Charles got on. Sunita, Charles got on first. Let Charles go ahead and go first.
Are you sure?
We're going to talk a lot about the same things. So.
All right, then, Charles, the floor is yours.
Good to see you, Senator. I don't mind playing back up for the Senator Warner, that's for sure. Well, let me kick it off then, because this is an important topic. I think as President Calvin Coolidge said, the business of America is business. This is what generates a lot of wealth in our country and makes us different from other countries, so that we have a lot of entrepreneurs who build businesses and build wealth to support their families, and they support their families that way and pass that down to their families. And so we laud entrepreneurs in this country, as we should, because it's one of our big differentiators. But not everybody has access to actually building a business. And as Senator Warner will talk about, access to capital has been one of the reasons. I'll let him spend the most of the time on that. But one stat that I think we should be aware of, the pandemic, we're still recovering from that. About 41% of Black-owned businesses, to give you one example, went into, they basically closed from February to April 2020, and some much longer. Some have come back, but many did not. So we took a big hit during the pandemic, and we're recovering as we speak. I would say other things that happen on the access to capital, the CDFIs, which Senator Warner worked on, and I worked on it a little bit with him as well, have been wonderful, but entrepreneurs need more capital. If you look at where they source capital from, a survey by McKinsey of over 2,000 businesses found that most Black families surveyed say they didn't know anyone who could lend them $3,000 if they wanted to start a business. And that's different from other sectors of the economy. So that's part of the challenge. And I'll let him talk about some of the wonderful things he's done to try to address that issue. Another important area is just basic training and support. It is hard to start a business. There's lots you have to know, all sorts of things, not just capital, but understanding a P&L statement, regulations, how to benchmark yourself, managing people, sourcing talent, lots and lots and lots of things. And if you make those decisions wrong up front, it's very hard to recover sometimes. So let me give you a few examples. I would say Black entrepreneurs tend to make decisions in business ideation, like what business am I going to start, that may limit the size of the business later. About 74% of them are starting the business in the same 5 industries. They tend to be consumer-facing, smaller businesses. So that's okay. We want people doing that, but there are other sectors of the economy. If you look at wholesale businesses, people who sell to other businesses, that's 24% of the economy. For Black entrepreneurs, that's about 1% of what they do. So understanding that up front, that there are other parts of the economy you may not be trained in, may not have access to, you can get training, you can understand it. And a lot of times the most successful entrepreneurs are people who have worked in that industry before. So that's where workforce development, skills training come in, getting people kind of an understanding of other sectors of the economy so they can make those decisions. So training is a big one, and that's what the job of incubators do. One of the ones that I'm involved with, the Center for Black Entrepreneurship on the campus of Morehouse and Spelman, raised about $40 million to train businesses in how to be a business. And we have other business people come in and teach those courses. We have VCs and private equity experts. They're in the business of helping people build businesses. That's what they do. They advise entrepreneurs and coach them and get them capital, help them recruit talent, help them with strategy. We need more of that as a accessible thing for more entrepreneurs, particularly in the Black community. I would say people also lack access to networks. And so by networks, I mean people who have relationships that can help you in other ways. Typically, when you start a business in the broader economy, there's lawyers or accountants, business consultants who seek you out because they want business. And part of the way they convince you to use their services, they connect you to other people. That's part of the service they bring. If you don't have that and you're on your own, everything you're doing, it's a much harder job. And so access to networks is another one. And then lastly, I would say the large businesses could be helping smaller businesses. Many have some form of supplier diversity program, but they can do more of that. What they need is to create suppliers in their own businesses. So a lot of them say, well, there's no Black suppliers, so that's why I haven't hired them. Well, you can create them, and that's where the federal government could come in and help. Let's fund incubators run by large companies who have supply chains, they know what they need, and help create some companies as well. And they can adopt a business and help evolve them over time. So there's lots of things that could be done. And the good news is entrepreneurship is alive and well in the Black community. You look at the last 5 years, it's been growing about 34% on average, fastest growing sector of the economy for new business formation, but they need more capital and training and access to these relationships. So I'll pause there and pass it on to the senator.
Well, thank you, Charles. And let me thank Sunita and the Ethic Media Services for this opportunity. We had a spirited conversation a few weeks back, or maybe a month or so ago, on some legislation I've got on issues like TikTok and others, and happy to revisit that as well. I may also applaud Charles because I think for a long time, particularly in the African American community, there was appropriate and needed focus on civil rights and economic rights, but not enough focus on how we grow entrepreneurship, businesses, access to capital. And the Black Economic Alliance is a refreshing, fresh voice that's more forward-leaning than some of the traditional organizations. Number one. This is an issue that I've cared about since before I was in politics. And when I was governor, I started now one of the nation's larger community development financial institutions, CDFIs, as I'm sure most of our media folks know, are institutions that by definition have to serve over 60% of their recipients have to be low and moderate income individuals, which again, unfortunately in our country does translate hugely disproportionately into people of color. The genesis, I want to talk about three things very quickly. The genesis of a strange bedfellows kind of moment where I partnered strongly with then Secretary Mnuchin of the Trump administration during one of the COVID eras was to try to get a lot of capital into our minority depository institutions, Black, Brown, AAPI, others, which unfortunately, particularly on the Black side, has dramatically shrunk that universe post the financial crisis of 2008, where there's only on Black-owned banks in the country, literally a couple dozen. Better on Asian and Latino, although sometimes those are connected to large institutions that come out of Spain or out of Japan or Korea elsewhere. But as Charles mentioned, and the numbers were not just in the Black community, the number of Latino businesses we lost in COVID was about 40%. And the original business support programs that went into supporting small businesses, it's called I think brain fart. The initial program, frankly, used the distribution model of community banks. And so Black and brown businesses and Asian businesses, because they did not have traditional banking relationships, didn't participate, didn't get their fair share. So coming with working with Mnuchin and others, we obtained $12 billion, $9 billion of it in tier one equity, $3 billion of it in grants to CDFIs and MDIs during the COVID process. It was a program administered by the Treasury Department called ESIP, because this access to capital issue is hugely important. I mean, Charles can cite some of the statistics, but so many of the Black and brown owned businesses, minority owned businesses, bootstrapped away. They don't have a traditional banking relationship, and CDFIs by definition can service that. I'm happy to say that we have got that $9 billion out in all but a few dollars in terms of the tier one capital. The grant money has gone out, and it's been a huge benefit for those institutions. And they have, even more specifically, I think, Charles, correct me if I'm wrong, Black women entrepreneurs are frankly the fastest growing segment of any part of our economy. And we've got to make access to capital. And candidly, on a just plain old political issue, I've got a CDFI coalition now that's got 10 Democrats, 10 Republicans. I can find Republican partners who are so much more interested in access to capital issues than traditional anti-poverty programs. So point number one. Point number two, another initiative that I've got now that we've not been as successful yet, but we're reintroduced, is called the LIFT program. One of the reasons why we have this huge wealth gap in the country, again, if we go Black-white, 10-to-1 white families over Black families, because of prior housing discrimination and the inability oftentimes to amass enough capital that comes in home ownership. The single biggest asset for the vast majority of Americans is a home. So we have an initiative called LIFT that would again target first generation, first time home buyers, which again is over 2/3 people of color. And that's a lot of immigrant community, that's Black community, that's brown community, and says that if you qualify, I won't go into all the details, but if you are that first generation, first time home buyer, and you can qualify for a 30-year mortgage within a certain income strain, we will give you, on the terms of a 30-year mortgage, a 20-year mortgage, which by effect doubles the amount of equity that you accumulate in the first 10 years. So how do we do wealth, access to capital, number one, wealth building, number two. Number three, and then I will turn it over to our other colleagues, is that we all know in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd, there were lots of companies that promised they were going to deal a lot with systemic racism in this country. Matter of fact, if you put it all together, the rough estimates were there were $300 billion of promises made by corporate America. The interesting thing is many of the foundations have even been unwilling to kind of really monitor how much of that has actually been paid out because they're afraid of losing their funding source. But in reality, about $5 billion is all that's been paid out in terms of real investment. So working with Deputy Secretary Wally Adeyemo, working again with my friend Mike Crapo, a good conservative Republican senator from Idaho, we've created the Economic Opportunity Coalition. And we are going back to all those companies and enterprises that said they wanted to do the right thing and say, okay, we're going to make it easy for you to do the right thing. We've already announced $1 billion in commitments from large entities to put long-term deposits into these minority-owned banks and CDFIs. We think we can grow that. We want to, for those who want to do the right thing, to try to make sure everybody in this country gets a fair shot. We want to make it easy for those companies to actually literally put their money where their mouth is and be able to leverage it. Because candidly, some of the programs if they simply take on one small school or one small neighborhood, they may be able to pound their chest and say what they're doing well, and I want to undermine that, but it doesn't bring the power of leverage and bring the power of scale. So I very much appreciate the chance to be here. Proud of what we've done with the $12 billion in direct government investment, not assistance, investment. Proud of and love to share with everybody the information about the LIFT project in terms of wealth building. And third, the Economic Opportunity Coalition, which I think we've got a great start to. And I look forward to working with for a long time to come. And again, we've got so far broad bipartisan support. So thank you, Sunita, and happy to turn it over to whoever's next.
Thank you to both Senator Warner and Mr. Phillips. We have a number of questions for you in the chat, and I'm wondering if you can both stay on for a few minutes and answer a few questions from reporters.
And let me also apologize, Sunita. I know you told us, please speak so slowly for our translators. I obviously failed on that. So
I think they got it nonetheless.
I will try on the answers to do better, but thank you.
I feel more, I forgot.
So our first question for you comes from Anjana Nagarajan Dutani of India Currents. Anjana.
Hi, Sunita. Do you want me to ask the question? Both my
Please,
questions?
yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. This is such an important topic for our community. Charles, first question for you. Do you see a difference in access for capital for Black women versus men? And Senator Warner, my question for you is, as you mentioned, home ownership has been a tool for wealth building for decades in this country, but for millennials with huge college debt, that is not so much of a reality now. How can we help our younger citizens build businesses because that debt will be seen as a liability by traditional banking?
Great questions.
I'll go on the first one. There is a difference. That's a good question. Black men have slightly more access to capital than Black women. The reasons for that are unclear because they tend to start different types of businesses that might be related to it, and in different parts of the country, the mix is different. So we don't have the full answer to it, but the aggregate numbers show that there's about a 20% difference, but that's a good question.
Well, let me answer, but let me be a little bit provocative here on Charles's answer. I think one of the things we need to do is we encourage minority entrepreneurs, and particularly in the Black community, is to encourage partnerships. The history of most successful business in America, and you can name all of the big companies, from the Facebooks to the Apples to what, they all started with partners. And many minority entrepreneurs try to start it solo alone, and nobody's good at all things. So encouraging more partnership in terms of starting business is important. In terms of the question on student debt, I say this is the first person in my family to graduate from college, and I came out with $15,000 of student debt. If I come out with 50 or 60,000, the way young people do now, I would have never taken a chance as an entrepreneur. I failed miserably the first 2 times. Third time I did okay. I also realized if I had not been a white guy with appropriate education, I wouldn't have gotten 3 shots. But I think student debt is a hugely problematic issue. As we've seen, President Biden tried. What I would like to do, and I think could be, even with the Congress I work in, politically viable, rather than completely writing off at some arbitrary cut line student debt. And we should have done this candidly when interest rates were much lower. I think, and we should have done this during COVID and done it in one of these big investments. We should allow all student debt to get refinanced below 2%. And, if you could, we did all of these other subsidy programs, but refinancing student debt to below 2%, particularly when interest rates were so low, it doesn't relieve the whole burden, but it is the debt servicing charge that costs people most. And I don't think you would have the political pushback that some of the straight forgiveness programs have had. And I hope if we can get the Fed to start lowering interest rates again, that I can build some support to bring down the debt service, because I can show you with numbers that the difference between 2% interest and 6% interest, even on a $50,000 loan, is a huge amount.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Julia Dudley Najib. Julia, welcome, and please ask your question.
Yes, first I want to thank the Senator Warner and also Mr. Phillips for being on this very important press briefing. Julia Deli Najib, On Me News, and also Black Headline News. I am still concerned about how BIPOC businesses get access to funding, especially micro businesses and sole proprietors. And I'm hoping that they will be considered, and if there's a way that they can be considered, as the first part to my question, because normally they have businesses 1 to 5 persons, and they're usually excluded. If you look at the PPP loan and some of the things during the pandemic, it did not apply to many of the sole proprietors, which includes many of the media partners that are on this call. And then finally, the second part of my question would be dealing with the DBE process, which can be difficult, and it goes to the chambers. I've even tried to go through CDFI several years ago. The process was very frustrating. How can we alleviate or ease that process? So 2 parts of my question, and I thank you both.
I will start and then turn it over to Charles. You're right on micro businesses. What I would hope we would do with the Economic Opportunity Coalition is try to take the best examples of micro lending, and whether we bring them to CDFIs, or we've got interest from some of the traditional community banks, and they're going to need some support. So I think pushing micro lending is a huge issue. And one of the things that gets in kind of into nerdy details, and I know I'm supposed to speak, but it's important, is lending to a sole proprietor micro business is different than lending to a bricks and mortar enterprise that may be small but has a lot of folks. And one of the areas we need to focus on are who are the bank regulators. If you're not trained in low and moderate income or micro lending, you're going to push the institution not to take any risks. And one of the things we've tried to look at is if we can take some philanthropic capital and put a first dollar loss component in there on certain loans that go to, sole proprietors, for example. We can leverage that a long, long way. But this question of how you get that first dollar loss for micro lending, I think is very important. And very quickly, because I want to turn over to Charles, I've already forgotten the second part. You had a 2-part question. I want to make sure I answer both. Could you tell me again quickly? Because I had another quick comment.
I had it be unmuted. The second part of the question had to do with the DBE process, because unless you are part of a chamber or can pay that monthly fee, you have a lot of micro businesses and sole proprietors that won't even go through that process because they either have to pay for that institution. And if they go through it by themselves, it just never gets completed. So the ease of the
Senator
DBE
Warner,
process.
before you answer that question, could you please explain what the DBE process is? We had that question come through the chat.
Julia, you wanted to explain it?
Disadvantaged business enterprises. And so when you are trying to qualify for business contracts, state or federal, they prefer you to be under that label, because then they also get whatever you want to call it, or reward, or at least are able to report that to the federal government and to the state that they are doing business with minority businesses. And so that's how they're able to prove that.
And whether it's disadvantaged businesses or even within the classic definition of SWAM, small women and minority businesses.
Correct.
This is something I worked on when I was governor, to try to make sure there's only a single certification process. Because if you're a sole proprietor, you may have to go through a local certification process, a state certification process, and a federal certification process.
That is correct.
And in Virginia, we made some progress, but candidly, this ability to have common certification that would work for government and also work for large corporates, and in terms of who qualifies, is an area we need more work on. And I think Charles has also spent some time on this, but it is a real problem that we need to address.
Yeah, I would say here in New York, the MTA, which is our mass transit, which is run by the state, which has been the most aggressive agency giving out minority contracts, they actually built an entire training program for this. how to get certified, but went way beyond that. How do you get bonded? Understand that if you need to be a general contractor, not a sub, and help break the contracts down to small enough so people will get, bonded over time and be as a GC. So that it takes a intentional program to train people and get them through the program. If you just throw them into these different certification programs, it's not clear how they get through it. You're right, it's overwhelming. People just don't do it. But the guy who did that, the MTA, has been kind of a model, and some of the other agencies here are starting to want to tap his program. In fact, I actually turned him over to some of the federal programs, told them to take a look at what he was doing. The other access to capital is the CDFIs that Senator Warner worked on. He mentioned earlier, he got a lot of money for them. The problem there is a lot of entrepreneurs aren't aware of what they are. There's over roughly 1,000 in the country, and they have 1,000 different names. It's not like you can go to Chase or there's one name, you know what it is. It's all kind of custom businesses, and they kind of raise this capital. Some of the loans are as small as $500. The average here in New York is around 25,000. So they do serve an important component of the community. But unless you happen to run into one, you don't know that. They do other services as well, like the coaching, the training, monitoring your business, because they know they want to recirculate that capital. So they want you to pay it back. And so it's a special kind of lending operation, but it is not apparent just because it's so bespoke and there's no branding, there's no marketing, there's no one who knows anything about it unless you just happen to stumble on the one.
Can I just add
one final point is the third thing we can do for them to make them more accessible to speed up the process is technology. And so if you look at the way they do loans, it's the traditional way, paperwork. They couldn't respond fast enough to PPP programs. It just takes too long. If you look at these fintechs that are starting up now or been around now for a while, they do same day loans. So you integrate your financial systems, they tap into that through some APIs. They can see your financial statements right away. They give you a yes or no in 2 hours. Contrast that with what happens at a CDFI. So technology is a piece of this going forward.
And I just wanted to make the point that Charles just made. There is a technology partial solution here, from certification to lending, and frankly, some of the larger social media platforms who virtually all Americans use, they really wanted to do the right thing, helping to make these pathways, access to capital, easier and simpler. In terms of branding would be a great contribution.
All right, the next question comes from Nakia Cooper, but before Ms. Cooper asks her question, I wanted to let the Senator and Mr. Phillips know that about half of the audience here are small business owners, mom and pops who started their papers on their kitchen table. So you are speaking to an audience in real need of the information that you are providing. So Nakia, with that context, please ask your question.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, thank you. Thank you so much, Senator Warner and Mr. Phillips for being on here today. I don't know, I feel like I might be a little bit of I'm a big novice, but in my day job, I am a digital managing editor at our NBC station here in Houston. I'm off today, so this is great. So I operate the web department. I manage the web department at our KPRC Channel 2 News. But being that journalist and being a person about the community, I wanted to start my own newspaper, and for the community news and Black news and minority news, right? So my question is, I started my own website and community newspaper in 2020 during the height of the pandemic, and I get pretty good numbers on the website. But what I'm seeing, the issue is that a lot of people are thinking that newspapers are dying, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm not having much luck with people wanting to invest in my company or even buy advertisements. Like, I've gone to the big banks, I've gone to people and they're like, no, we're not putting our eggs in the basket of the, for buying advertisements for newspaper and print. Everybody keeps saying we're straying away from that. But see, I still believe in newspapers. I believe in the power of print media. And are there any resources for someone like me? I'm trying to stay afloat, but I literally, I use my own paychecks from work to fund.
Yeah,
I can, and I'm drowning here, but I'm very stubborn and selfish. I don't want to give up. I'm not going to give up, but I'm eating less at home because I'm funding everything. What do I do? What resources are out there for someone like me?
Excellent question.
Let me start on that, Ms. Cooper. One, and if we can get your information, I will try to identify some of the CDFIs that are in the Houston area that might be interested.
Okay.
And then, but the two, and this may, I don't want to be discouraging on this, but there are two things from a policy standpoint we're wrestling with. One is we already have a problem with social media taking people's news content and not compensating you for that. And we tried to pass a bill that would be targeted from startup, traditional print, to other content creators to make sure there's compensation. You know, the Facebooks, the Metas of the world say, oh my gosh, we're going to leave the market, or Google, we're going to leave the market. Well, baloney. Australia, other nation states have done that. We should do this in America, number one. And we got close last year to passing a bill, but we didn't get there. But then to make it even more frightening is if we don't do some copyright and content protection as we move to artificial intelligence tools, if they can scrape all of your Black news from Houston and put it into a large language model and you don't get compensated. I had somebody who was a publisher, works in, I think Charles may know, that publishes a lot of food magazines, famous ones, that make a good money. He said, why would I put more money into Food and Wine or Bon Appetit or anything if ChatGPT is scraping all this data and somebody says, give me the best meatloaf recipe, and you don't know if it comes from, a piece of Black news, Bon Appetit, Betty Crocker's cookbook. If we don't do better protection on content as we get into AI, candidly, everybody on this Zoom is in trouble, no matter how well you're doing at this point.
Absolutely. Mr. Phillips, any way in here?
Yeah, just a small addition. Newspapers are tough, but I would say that a lot of businesses I've seen over the years, because I've been running businesses for a long time, start off with one idea, but pivot to something else as they learn the market and see the opportunity. You're kind of like a running back looking for the hole in the line. Okay, I started left, but it's over to the right. So this may be an opportunity. I mean, you work for a news station, which a lot of has digital reach. That may be a good partner for you to switch to a digital model. And the other advantage of that is it's news more often and potentially globally, can go anywhere, right? So it's a lot easier. And so that might be the right pivot on next. But that's why I say businesses need coaching. That's part of the coaching is let's assess the strategy and should you go left or right, based on what you know now.
Okay.
Before I let you go, I have a question for both of you, and that is, how do we retain businesses in underserved communities? I live on the edge of East Oakland, which had a mall for a period of time, and then that collapsed. Businesses left. There's no bank, there's no grocery store, etc. How do we keep small businesses in place in these underserved communities? And do special economic zones apply here at all as an incentive to serve these underserved communities?
Charles, you want to start there? You want to start?
I do think things like the opportunity zone could be helpful, but as it was structured, the details didn't quite achieve the goals. It helped a lot of real estate people get cheaper financing and do things they were probably going to do anyway. But encouraging people to live there, because you need people living there to have a community, and two, other businesses to help them grow. We probably need to rethink how we set up those opportunity zones and restructure that. I've seen a few successful ones at the state and local level. There's something called BIDS here in New York, Business Improvement Districts here in New York, where they do financing for certain neighborhoods, and people have started businesses. And you go up to Harlem, there's a lot of new businesses that have started, but it's not consistent and it doesn't have any scale. But if the federal government wanted to do something, that it would be something like that, just to restructure the opportunity zones, but make them more amenable to a small business as opposed to a real estate developer.
And can I just add on that, because I think Charles has hit the nail on the head for a couple of reasons. One, opportunity zones, was a bipartisan idea. Tim Scott and Cory Booker took the lead. I was the number 2 Democrat. But the way it got implemented, you would have a community and there were great tax advantages, but it meant that sophisticated real estate developer is going to buy the first building that's literally on the street where that's most ready to be go for renewal already and get huge business. This should have been what I urge you know, and it's the opportunity zone's got a bad name, and particularly a lot on the Democratic side. But I don't think we should throw away the idea. It's kind of expired at this point, and we need to restructure the opportunity zones to make it less about real estate redevelopment and really about what the initial idea was, which is small business development. The guy who, Charles, do you remember the guy it was one of the originally Facebook guy, or who was the guy that came up with the start?
Sean,
yes. I'm
I
glad you're forgetting too. But there was a
Sean Parker,
Sean Parker, a multi-billionaire who literally put a lot of time and effort. I think it was he had the idea that made sense, so needed to go to how do you build businesses in part of the community, and East Oakland, you name the community. But by the time you got the regulations written, it didn't end up coming out the way the idea. We need to revisit that.
Yeah, good idea.
Final question from Pilar Marrero. Pilar.
I'm sorry, I couldn't mute. Hi, everyone. Really nice discussion. So now that we have a Supreme Court that believes race should not be an issue in college admissions, is anyone nervous that programs for minority-owned businesses by the government will be targeted?
Listen, with this court, I think we should be nervous on almost every issue. It's why I think the argument I try to make on minority-owned businesses, and whether it's the CDFI funding, the LIFT approach, all of these, I try to make the argument, particularly to some of the folks that may not start with this idea, that if you want America to be healthy, and as a former governor of Virginia, if I want Virginia to be healthy, Virginia at this point is 35% Black, Brown, or AAPI. If that over a third of Virginia doesn't have the same fair shot that white guys have, then the enterprise isn't going to do as well. And I try to make this on a pure old-fashioned capitalism argument all the time. And I think I've at least found in the political environment we live in today in this country, I've had more success than simply trying to argue on basic fairness. And that's a more practical solution than it is a set of beliefs. There are, America has had institutional racism. We need to deal with it. But at the end of the day, we ought to be measured by what we actually get done. And if I can make the argument around the business principles, it's one of the reasons why I so applaud what Charles is doing. He didn't start a civil rights organization. He started a Black Economic Alliance.
That's right. Before we let you go, I wanted to introduce you to your fellow panelists, Shanaz Daver, who is the CMO at Khosla Ventures, and Sierra Georgia, who is the founder of Gelat'oh, based in Washington, D.C. And Shanaz and Sierra, do you have any questions or comments that you'd like to ask of Senator Warner or Mr. Phillips before they head out?
I just wanted to thank Senator Warner for actually calling it and basically saying he got 3 shots at any kind of company because he was white and male. It's one of the points I'm going to make on how difficult it is for women to get founded and funded by venture capital. So thank you for saying that.
And I would even go further. As the first generation to go to college, I went to George Washington undergrad, and I went to Harvard Law School. I normally say if I'd not been a Harvard Law guy white guy, I wouldn't have gotten 2 shots or 3 shots, maybe not 1 shot, but I appreciate, at least I hope I'm self-aware enough.
Thank you for saying that.
Thank you.
Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
I had one thing. I just wanted to say,
Sorry, Sierra.
no, it's okay. Thank you, Senator Warner and Mr. Phillips. It was a pleasure to listen to you all. And as a small business owner, I'm really excited to see the access to capital and wealth building part of this to really help the community. But more importantly, just making it easier for people to do the right thing, whether it's the organizations and that support small business owners, and just making it easier to do the right thing. So it was a pleasure to share this panel with you all.
Thank you all. Thank you. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Samir.
Yes. And we move on to Shanaz Daver of Khosla Ventures, who's going to discuss the challenges that women have in accessing funding to not only start, but retain and grow their small businesses. Shanaz, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. So I realize I'm an 11th hour substitute here since Senator called me last night, so just bear with me. So there's so much that I agree with what Senator Warner said and what Chuck said. I'm going to kind of give you a perspective of access to capital in a different one, which is kind of venture capital, which may not be for everyone, but I'll just share a perspective on it. And I'm particularly going to talk about the challenges that women face. So as a woman, I would have to say in the last year, here are some of the things I've heard from women founders. I went to fundraise and was not taken seriously because I was a sole woman founder until I found a male co-founder. Probably resonates with a few of you. I went to get venture funding and I was asked when I was going to have kids. No guy was ever asked that. I was told I was too aggressive in my financial projections, yet when my male partner presented it, he was seen as confident. Unfortunately, this is happening in 2022 and 2023, and I've been in the industry for over 35 years, and I heard the same thing 35 years ago. So it's kind of bad. And if you're Black or Hispanic, it gets worse. But I do feel overall that we need to change things, and there are some things that are changing. Just to give a certain amount of stats, it's fair to say that today only 2% of VC dollars go into women-led founders. It needs to change. Access to capital is key, but it doesn't have to just be venture capital. It can be what Senator Warner talked about. It can be government grants. It can be federal grants, all kinds of things to get your business up and running. I do feel things are changing, but I also want to bring up what are things that we can all do better overall. So first, I think women are starting and building exceptional companies, and we don't celebrate them. If you look really at companies like Glossier, Stitch Fix, Spanx, Bumble, 23andMe, Canva, they are multi-billion-dollar companies started by women. I know several of these founders personally, and I've watched them do the person that Sunita was saying, kind of sitting at the kitchen table, drawing it out, seeing what it is, and they are exceptional leaders and founders. We really need to celebrate them more. In fact, I think if there was ever a government campaign we could do just talking about these amazing women, I think it would go a long way. Secondly, I think in venture capital, like in most things in life, a lot of it is pattern recognition, right? We marry people similar to ourselves, we associate with people similar to ourselves, and very often venture capitalists will invest in things that they understand. I would say if you have more women venture capital partners, they invest in more women-led businesses. Stats show that. And in this growing field of maternal health, fertility, IVF, menopause, etc., all of these things, you will find companies that are backed and they will have a woman-backed partner from the venture firm. If you look at Kindbody or any of those. And I think those things are happening right now, which is a good sign. I think women are also starting their own VC firms. A lot of them are going, I can go in a big firm or I can start my own. And in fact, just this week, two of my colleagues started a firm called Adverb. Two women, unbelievable women. They came out of Twitter. They've done angel investing and they're doing it on their own.
Shanaz, sorry, could you repeat the name of that firm?
Yeah, the firm is called Adverb. And I'm trying to speak slowly, so I'm hoping I'm nailing that part.
You are.
And there are other bigger VC funds. There's a company called Acute Capital that is woman-led. There is a company called Cowboy Ventures that is led by a woman called Aileen Lee. And they invest in all kinds of companies. But once you have women in a position of power, influence, and decision-making economically, it changes the tide for lots of women. So we do need to encourage that and be able to do it. Men also tend to be our biggest advocates. So I hate it when people go, oh yeah, it's just a women's issue. Let's not worry about the men. No. In my life, for where I have landed, men have been my biggest advocate. I cannot actually honestly say that I got to where I was because of a lot of women, because there weren't a lot of women, and it was men. And that's an important ally or partnership to build. I do feel, and I think a lot of you might be mothers or parents or have nieces and nephews, is when young girls are in high school and college, I really strongly feel now more and more we need to teach them advocacy. It needs to be learned of how do you advocate for yourself. The world is not fair, period. It doesn't matter. And it's doubly not fair, unfortunately, if you are a woman. And I wish I could say something different, but I really can't. It's going to be 2x as many hurdles, and you have to advocate 2x as more. And if we can create a world where women know how to advocate for themselves when they're younger, it really helps a whole lot. And I'm seeing this with some young girls in high school on the way it's going. If you have the ability or the inclination to get into STEM or into biology, do it. A lot of what I find is a lot of women starting up companies today are actually coming out of biotech. And they're the women founders. Because if you look at schools, more women are getting masters and PhDs in biology, genetic engineering, etc., and they're starting companies. These are all good things. I have a daughter. She needs to look up to those people and want to role model herself with that. The one thing I also wanted to mention before I forget is, and Senator Warner brought this up, so I'm really glad he did, is we need to give women the permission to fail. We do not do that as a society. When a woman basically goes to be the head of a company, she gets less dollars in funding than a male. So like Senator Warner, she can't experiment because she doesn't have the ability to experiment. And the truth is there is very few companies in the world that start with a product, nail it, and become a big company with that. Perfect example is Slack. Slack started as a video game company. They created Slack to chat between themselves. Nobody remembers that. And so sometimes I often look at, give us the ability to experiment and to fail. And if Senator Warner can fail 3 times being a white male, I do not know a single woman today that can say that, and we need to change that. And lastly, I want to say for the media, there are very few women at the head of companies, and we are laser focused on them just because there are so few of them and they're so rare. But when they fail, all of us beat them down too brutally. The media has a big role in this. The community has a big role in this, and we need to stop doing that. I watch this with a male founder and a female founder. The female gets killed. The male founder, semi-pass on it. This also needs to change. I recognize it's more clickbaity and all of that stuff, but you're not helping the cause overall. So in summary, I have to believe the world is changing, and we will continue to change it if we all do it as a community. Private enterprise, public enterprise, venture capital, women themselves, education, large part of it is quite frankly family and opportunity. And I do think we can do that. And I do think if we do that, we can have our own woman Steve Jobs, or our own woman Jack Ma, or our own woman Mukesh Ambani. So I feel very positive about this, but I know these things have to change, and it's not just one thing versus another. So with that, I will end, and I will let Sunita do what she's supposed to do.
Thank you so much, Shanaz. That was so insightful. And we have a number of questions for you. Henrietta, you asked a couple of really important questions. Can you unmute yourself and ask your questions?
Yes, Sunita, thank you so much. Shanaz, first of all, I'm just wondering, you talked about the questions that were asked of you. Aren't there federal laws under the EEOC that prevent companies from asking personal questions like that in terms of your marriage, your pregnancy?
I don't know per se. I do know it's not okay to ask how much comp you make, but you can, I think, ask, and maybe you cross a line in doing that, quite honestly, but I have heard it time and time again of when are you going to have kids? Yeah. So
go on, I'm sorry.
No. So I actually don't know the exact answer, and I should look it up on that, but I'm just sharing the anecdotes I've heard.
Okay, thank you. Next, you talked about women being allowed to fail. Elizabeth Holmes was celebrated as a successful woman entrepreneur,
Yes.
and she had a colossal failure. So what effect, short-term and long-term, might this have as the perception of women as capable leaders?
That's a really, really good question. So there are a couple of things. I am actually pretty interested in this, and full disclosure, I went to the trial because I live like really close to it. I went on the opening day, I went when the verdict was done, I went when the decision was made. There were a couple, part of the reason I did it is actually I was working at life sciences companies at the time. So I would say short term, any life sciences woman founder got really hurt. Because everybody thought, okay, there was just no way to believe any of it. I would say now, longer term, I think it's kind of fading a lot more overall. And, you know, she did kind of, you know, create certain things that happened overall, but I'll flip it around and ask you guys is, not that I'm defending her, but are there other founders that may not be female that deserve to be out there too? You know, does Sam Bankman-Fried deserve to be out there? You know, and all of these other people overall. So I think if you'd asked me that question right at the start, I would have said it hurt life sciences women to get funding for sure. And I think that's actually changed now.
Let's take one final question from Anjana Nagarajan Bhutani. Anjana, please ask your question.
Hi, Shanaz. Thank you so much for saying out loud the things you did today. So my question for you is, when you're at the table with a bunch of men and they're talking about who to fund, how do you advocate for the women founders? I'm asking because I think these are tactics we can all use to support women in our lives in all spheres.
So there's a couple of, it's a good thought. So there's a couple of things to look at, right? One is you can, you know, overall you can look at everything like ABC that they do this, ABC that does it. I will often hit on the personal. If a partner has a daughter, they are more open. I mean, it's just pattern recognition, okay? So a long time ago, I don't know if you guys remember, but there used to be a helmet company called Belkin. You know, it kind of had, do you remember that company, helmets? Okay, so the interesting thing is they never did kids' helmets for years and years. Then somebody at the company had kids and they decided to do kids' helmets and their sales rocked overall. It wasn't an economical decision, it was purely that. So I often say that just overall looking at it. The things that I find really, really hard very often is, but it's opening up more. I'll give you an example of maternal health. Maternal health is just, period. It's an awkward conversation to have. I tend to be, when I'm talking about it, very matter of fact and biological about it. This is what's happening. This is what's going on. And that's kind of the way to, you know, look at doing it. I will also, this is my tactic, is I will also pause. Sometimes, particularly, I think particularly women, we hate the silence, so we like to fill it up and we just keep talking. That's the worst thing to do. The best thing to do is to drop something and then just be quiet. And then kind of have them, you know, go with it is the way I'll find it, you know, overall. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just being clear. It's just not. And that's why you'll find, like a lot of men don't go to the supermarket, so they have no idea why you would use coupons. Years ago, we were looking to you know, we're looking to invest in a coupon company, but partners were male. They didn't go to the supermarket. They didn't understand why anyone would have coupons, you know? So that's where I also feel like when you have a woman advocate, it also helps a lot, you know, and I'm patient. I don't think it's going to happen. I wish it would happen faster, okay, in all fairness. But if it's going to chip away and take longer and longer, okay, that's okay if we're going to move in the positive direction.
Shanaz, thank you so much for your insights today. I hope you're reading all of the comments praising you for your remarks. We very much appreciate you being here today. And we end with Sierra Georgia, the founder of Gelat'oh, who's going to be speaking about the challenges that she's having in expanding her business, which is based in Washington, D.C. Sierra, welcome. And as I said earlier, I wish this was an in-person conversation so that we could sample your delicious looking gelatos.
I wish that for us too, but that's okay. We're here. We're all here. Okay, well, thank you again for having me. And it's just been such a pleasure to listen to all of these perspectives and going into it. You know, I have my points and the things that I wanted to say, but before I even get into that, and my actual story is that there's a lot of talk about our communities. Like there's layers to this small business, growing Main Street America issue. And it's really not even only a color thing, it's an American thing for me. And it's not only just throwing money at the problem, it's what and I'm gonna get into this, it's really like the industry, the small business industry, and how more small business owners like myself, this started with just a team of one and is not that much bigger than that, can actually get to that next level and scale. So just a little about me, everyone. I actually from New Jersey. I was raised in a small business, a very entrepreneurial family. I'm from South Jersey, raised in a moving and storage transportation company with multiple locations. And we had a Atlantic City waterfront club growing up. So everything was always family owned and operated. So I had a front row seat of what that looked like growing up. It had a major impact on me as an entrepreneur today. So fast forward, when I went to Howard University, I graduated, I studied international business, graduated. And when I graduated, my family business was shut down. And I had to figure it out. It was the first time that I had to get a job, actually, outside of my family. And I worked for the FAA. I was the FAA for 6 years in their international office as the foreign travel expert. And in 2013, I resigned and became DC's first gelato truck. At the time, I was selling an Italian guy's gelato. I found the supplier and I was buying and selling the gelato for about 3 years with a lot of success alongside my sister. Fast forward in 2016, they offered me a licensing deal. It was too expensive. So I went to Italy, learned how to make gelato. I went to Cappigiani Gelato University. I became an artisan gelato master, and I've been making the gelato I sell since 2016. And so with that being said, when I went over, I didn't even know how to say gelato properly when I first started. I'll be honest, I used to say gelato. I don't even say that often. And it took me, I didn't know anything. The only reason why I chose gelato was because there was ice cream. I didn't even know what it was really. I didn't know the difference. So fast forward, in Italy, when I got to Italy, I felt like I discovered this world that I didn't know existed. I was very well traveled. I've been around the world a couple of times, and gelato was more of a lifestyle. And the way they would talk about America being such a open market, and how the, it's like this virgin gelato country, I'll be honest, is how people would describe it, literally in those words, and how their mission was spreading the gelato culture and taking it over in America too. I was like, no, I wanted to be on the front lines of what specifically the gelato industry looked like in America developing. And I didn't want, when I created my business, when I came back, it was one, I was the only brown person at school the whole time, but I was also the only American person. And I was only one of 3 women out of the class of, let's say, about 20. And it was myself, there was a young lady from Japan, and there was a young lady from France. And that was it. So for me, yes, it was a color thing, but it's also an American thing. And America got no real respect at the international gelato table. And so when I came back, I said, you know what? I went through all these names in my brand. I'm like, I'm not trying to dress this up to make people think this is an Italian brand. This is a real American gelato. People weren't using the term, don't use the term American artisan gelato. So with that being said, when I came back, I got my first set of funding from a CDFI. I got about a good 11 no's. And then I came back to Philadelphia, went to the Enterprise Center, and they actually denied me. It was a different CDFI that I asked for enough to open a store and get all my equipment so I could have some cash flow. They wouldn't give me that much. They said, we don't think you should have a store, but we think you're onto something with what you want to do with gelato. So they literally gave me half of what I asked for. They gave me $50K, but that was enough. I said, well, this is what I got. I got to make it work. Mind you, I started with nothing. Even though I grew up in an entrepreneurial family, I didn't get any handouts when I wanted to go off into the gelato industry. So fast forward, I started, and immediately I knew by watching and studying brands that have come before me and their successes that I wanted to go straight into manufacturing. And a lot of these companies wanted all these stores, they spent all this money, and then they figured it out too late. So I wanted to start with manufacturing, and that's how I started my business. So let me say this, American manufacturing is something I'm very passionate about. I've been city to city, I've been all over this country, and there's cities like Pittsburgh, cities like Philadelphia, cities like Detroit, Flint, Michigan, where you see the remnants of what was American manufacturing. And it's like, there's nothing even going on with these buildings anymore. You know, I can get a very large factory in Philadelphia right now for the same price I could get a very, you know, like for $500,000, which to me is crazy. But let me just fast forward and keep it on here, is that with not only just throwing money at the problem and giving us startup funding, there is a very unique problem America has with manufacturing, and it's kind of embarrassing to me, is because even something as simple as a custom printed paper cup, right? I sell gelato, I do all of these things, but when I want to get branded for my business, right? I go to restaurants, you go get the white cups with the clear, you know, you do what you can because that's what I could afford. But now I've reached this another level and I want to get custom cups. It's cheaper for me to go to China, get China to print me the cups, sending them to me. I can get the cups, let's say for 10 cents, when I got to pay 80 cents here. There's no reason that makes sense. They're coming from halfway around the world. And so the fact that they don't make paper that much better than us, they don't make plastic that much better than us. I'm sure we have everything here in America to be able to produce our own daggone cups and stuff. And there's companies here that do make custom cups, but you have to pay a premium to keep it domestic, which is backwards and upside down. So in my opinion, if the powers that be, the government, the organizations that support businesses like me, do more to create a better industry for small businesses to crack out of small and become large, I think there would be a lot of innovation with business owners, and you would see more small businesses be able to scale. But shout out, you have people, organizations like SMBX. When former President Barack Obama signed the Job Security Act, he leveled the playing field by allowing small businesses to be able to fundraise publicly like large corporations do. And they created this, and the small business exchange was created. My company Gelat'oh, we currently have it's not even active, it's totally filled. I've had a problem getting funding for a while. It's not easy, right? But when I went to a lunch and learn, I thought I was learning some new tactics for my business, and it was an SMBX lunch and learn. I'm not a financially savvy, you know, I can be a great +1 at the Wall Street party, but I'm not getting in debates with anybody about finances. So when they explained it to me as someone who's, you know, not as financially literate as I probably should be, I understood it. And I said, why don't I know about this? I said, my people need to know about this. I need to spread the word. And I went to work, because what they do is they create the bond for your business. It's a real bond offering. And instead of it's a crowdfunding platform. So instead of you donate to somebody's GoFundMe, you'll never see that money again. But you buy a Gelat'oh bond, you get 11% back on your money for 2 years. And so it's bringing wealth back to the community, and it's empowering small business owners. When people have their money sitting in the bank, you don't know what they're borrowing on your money for. So when I saw that, I said, this is perfect, because a lot of small business owners, we're the hardest working people in America. We're not necessarily looking for a handout. We're looking for some a lift up. So when I saw that something that I could offer my community and build my community in a smarter way, I was all over it. And I'm very proud to announce that with our 25K bond offering, we were able to fill it in 4 days.
That's awesome.
By law, it has to be active by, you know, for X amount of time. So it's still on there, but it's completely filled. And it could surpass my expectations. And it's like, wow, more people need to know about this. So, you know, and then secondly, I would be remiss not to say that there's organizations like Union Kitchen, where I'm at right now. And Union Kitchen is the top, in my opinion, food accelerator in the country. And they get it. They want to make more American manufacturers. When I started my business, I wanted to create something that, unlike my family business, I wanted it to last forever, to be beyond me. You know, it's bigger than just me. And they get that. And so they need to be stood up. People like Union Kitchen, they provide not only a space to make your products in, but they have a whole ecosystem where they help you sell it. They give you the tools that you need. I came into the accelerator with basically already ready to go, but they helped me cross my T's and dot my I's and get my finances together and it's a living, breathing relationship. And so thankfully I partnered with them through the accelerator and gave them a portion of my business in exchange for an investment. And it was worth every single percent, because now I don't have to worry about, okay, where am I going to make gelato now? That's always been a thing of constantly finding consistent production space that's not hitting me over the head. Okay, so that's another thing. So we talked a lot about investors, but you always got to find the right investor is something. And you don't always want to just take the money. You want the right kind of money, because like you said, I did get a PPP support, but I still had to sell my first gelato truck during the pandemic. And I had to shut my business down for a year because ice cream manufacturing was considered non-essential. And that was in Philadelphia, right? So then when my business shut down, but you had places like Houston, Texas, where a very good friend of mine, she saw that I was all closed down and sad about the pandemic. And she said, well, hey, I'm going to open a store in the middle of the pandemic in the mall. And she says, why don't you come and be my project manager, help me out with these people? And I said, yes, please, I need something, right? So I went out there. And so it was like going to a whole nother world. And I just went to Texas. So it's like, for that kind of disparity, and I had more opportunities to help me get my business back going in Texas than I had in Philadelphia. So that kind of disparity, even though the pandemic affected all 50 states, I literally city surfed according to how I could get my business back open. And I know so many people that couldn't recover from that. And I'm still recovering, but I had to get real smart about it. And I told myself, I'm not quitting. This is just going to make my story better. And but not everybody has the ability to kind of pivot and keep going. So for me,
Sierra, I'm sorry, but it's going to cut off in a minute, but I really wanted to thank you for sharing your story. And I hope you read all of the comments in the chat, thanking you for sharing your very inspiring story.
No problem. I will read them. Anybody, you guys hit me up online, Gelat'oh.com, Gelat'oh, Gelat'oh with the H at the end.
And Sierra can possibly offer some really great advice on getting on SMBX for any of entrepreneurs that are on the call. Thank you again to all the speakers today, and thank you to reporters. We'll see you next Friday.